Hey, Scott, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, sure, Brian. Thanks for inviting me. Been in sales well over 25 years. Started as a manufacturer's rep, then developed onto a distributor rep, and now I'm a sales director.
Cool. What's that like? Are you
Um,
leading people, or
Say again, I'm sorry.
are you a manager?
Uh, that's what they say.
No one does what you say, though.
I'm a manager when the numbers are below where they should be, and I'm a sales rep when things are going good. So that's sort of how that works. I do direct a team of sales reps, six individuals, as well as I handle key accounts myself. So the company I'm with, and I've always had the same philosophy. We believe that in order to be a good director or manager, you need to keep your feet in the ground and you need to be out there. So we're out there as much as our reps are out there, and sort of, I guess, feeling the pulse of the street, so to speak.
Cool. And in the invite, you said you'd be more than happy to share what you've learned. Let's get into that.
Sure.
Because you're in a tough space.
Yeah. I was going to say last year was extraordinary for us. We're in a business that we luckily had a commodity that people needed. We sell things like disinfectants and hand sanitizer and PPE and things along that line. So we had more orders than we could fill. Now, yes, maybe a good problem, but at the same token, you need to prioritize. You need to manage that as much as managing, I guess, prospecting and developing the sale. So it was difficult in a different way.
Cool. And you started off as a manufacturer's rep, which, for people who don't know what that is, it's a 1099 essential, salesperson, no base salary typically.
No, actually, I was just the opposite. As a manufacturer's rep, I represented the factory, so I worked with distributors, meaning that I went out there and promoted just our products with distributors that may have handled many products, and it was my job to sort of make one of our products the front line versus the plethora of other ones that they had to offer.
And how did you do that? Because they want to view you as a commodity, right?
Right.
Yeah.
A big part of that, I think, is not unlike other sales. It was relationship driven. When I dealt with a certain distributorship, and let me regress a little bit. When I went into distributors, and I don't care who it was or what they sold, you had that range of sales rep that you had the top performers, you had the middle of the road folks, and you had your poor performers. And it was probably what I did was I would identify the top performers and the middle of the road folks and really work with them, develop a relationship with them and support them. Not that I wouldn't support anybody that came to me, but you get to know where you're going to get more mileage.
That's smart. A lot of people don't do that, right? They go to people who are willing to talk with them versus the people that they want to talk to.
Correct. Yeah. And again, too, you need to, I guess, show the value of your product to the rep that's representing your line, and not unlike showing the value of your product when you go to the end user or the customer. It's the same theory, I guess you could say.
And what motivates you?
It's a combination of winning. It's a combination of success. It's a combination of reputation. I've been in this business long enough, and I'm still happy to say I'm one of the top performers in the company. I'm not at the point in my career where I sit back and go, I've done this long enough and I can just coast. I still like to, I hate to say it, I still like to try and beat the sales reps that work for me. And not in a bad way, but in a competitive way. I like to give them an example, I guess a live example of a leader that is still succeeding every day, every month, every year, and not just sitting back and resting on their laurels. And, as a sales manager or a sales director, you're constantly preaching to your folks that, don't rest. Even if you hit your quota numbers for the month, keep going, things along that line. And that's something that I like to live, not just preach.
And do you look for that in people you hire?
Absolutely. again, the people we hire, I believe it's more what's in here than product knowledge. Anybody can learn product knowledge. Yeah, and you need the gumption inside, and you try and recognize that in people.
And how do you find that out? Do you look for competitive backgrounds? Do you look for just the emotional attachment to winning?
Yeah, that's a good question, because obviously emotional attachment is way different than what's on a resume and what's on paper. They're two different things, and you can try and, I guess, background check or check references of anybody that comes across, but until you get into a real honest conversation with somebody, and it takes 2 or 3 meetings, one interview doesn't do it.
Right.
And I find that after 2 or 3 meetings, people start to loosen up a little bit. They start to talk to you just like a human to human, not, boss to worker, not interviewer to interviewee. And you start recognizing little tidbits of what makes them who they are. And I believe after 2 or 3 meetings of some good in-depth conversation, unless they're really good actors, you can tell, sort of somewhat what they're made out of.
Yeah. And but still you're looking for that kind of competitiveness. Is that
Yeah,
true?
I mean, our business is the winners are the hunters, obviously.
Yes.
And I owned a business in one of my previous lives, and I was the sales manager, the key account develop person, the purchasing agent, the accountant, pretty well everything. But my main role was to hunt for new business. And unfortunately, I didn't have another hunter that worked with me at the time, but I had some great maintainers.
Yeah.
So I was the guy that went out and hunted the new business and passed over that business to these maintainers. And being a maintainer is not a bad thing either if that's the type of territory you have. But it really, I guess, depends on what your goals are as a company. Are your goals to maintain your account base? And believe me, I've worked for those companies. I worked for a company that did not want to grow, which flabbergasted me. I actually brought in some really big automotive business that required a fair amount of work, but I knew that we could have attained it. But the ownership basically said, "Yeah, you know what? It's a little too big for us right now. We're not interested," and that blew me away. But that every company has their own direction.
Right. And it has a culture. And I've had clients where they didn't pay commission and they were wondering why people weren't emotionally attached to winning.
Correct. I mean,
they're emotionally attached to keeping their job, yes, but not to growing.
Yep. As there commission or a bonus or whatever you want to call it, there has to be an incentive of some sort. And again, I'm sure you've worked with companies that have very strong incentives, meaning if you don't hit your quotas, you don't have your job. And that's a really strong incentive. But there are other companies, again, I'm sure you've encountered, that their incentives are so, I guess, meek or mild that it's really not even worth going after.
True. And what you end up getting is people smiling and nodding, kind of, yes, oh, yes, whatever you say, boss. You're a genius, boss.
Exactly. Why should I work that extra 10 hours if I'm only going to get another 0.5%, and otherwise I can go golfing on Friday and make the same amount of money.
Right. Because I always had this analogy when people say, well, why should we pay commission? It's like, well, you realize, like, at the end of the quarter, someone's getting up at 4 a.m. to get a flight to be somewhere else at 10 a.m. to try and win a deal. Now, if they're not on commission, what time do they want to get up?
Yep.
They'll get up at 7:30. They'll call them.
Exactly. That's correct. I mean, it's hard enough to weed out that type, even with commission, never mind not having a commission or an incentive program.
Yeah. Well, what else either helped you become great at sales or you've seen other people become great at sales?
I guess a few things. Number one, listening skills,
Yeah.
and learning when to shut up and listen and let the customer talk and take it in. I believe that's the biggest mistake of younger salespeople is they are so anxious and so stressed that they just want to regurgitate what they've learned about their product or about their company or who they're at. And they need to just back up, smell the roses a little bit, listen to their customer and sort of take their direction. That was a big thing that I had to learn, as a younger person developing in sales. I guess the other thing was my organizational skills, and meaning the long-term planning and being proactive instead of reactive. So many, again, young salespeople or newer salespeople fall into that trap that they do the reports that are needed to be done on a daily basis or a weekly basis for your company, but there's really nothing beyond that. And they hit the street on Monday morning, not quite sure what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And they basically waste half a day or a day to figure out the rest of their week. And that's the first hurdle. The second hurdle is, are you in a seasonal business that maybe you need to start planning for a winter product run or a spring product run? Or are your customers in a seasonal business where their busy period is the summer or it's the winter or whatever the case is? And you need to recognize those trends and plan long term for those trends and have a little bit of foresight.
I think that is critical because I don't think people really think beyond today or now.
Right. I mean, again, that's the society we live in, unfortunately. And there are so many people, you're right, that don't look beyond this week or next week or their next paycheck or whatever the case is. But the other thing I probably learned during our pandemic last year was flexibility and willingness to change. You have to, again, not only recognize the trends, but go with the trends, be flexible that you can change, your direction if need be, and adapt to it. And that's something that, again, a lot of new salespeople don't learn. They are taught a certain thing from either their manager that they did orientation with, or the coworkers that have done it for 15 years. And, they're like, this is the way we've done it. This is the way you need to do it. This is what makes us successful. But sometimes you need to break that mold and go it into the real world and go, hey, I'm having better success doing it this way. And again, I guess that old saying, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission.
Well, that proactiveness is a rarity. And because, when we're going through school and college, it's all reactive.
Right.
You show up at the time, you sit where you're told, you listen, you take notes, you study, you ask, what should I study? Right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's how we're raised. You're right. That's how we're taught, and that's how our society is. And in many jobs outside of sales, we're pretty well told what to do, when to do it, how long to do it for, when to stop for a break, and then when to go back at it. And as you know, sales is so I guess sales has no parameters, and we could work 20 hours a day if we really wanted to, or we could work 3. And we need to be very self-disciplined in what we do and very self-aware, I guess you could say, of what we're doing and who we're dealing with and the times around us.
Right. Because when you think about it, to be curious, that's a proactive thing.
Yes.
To
Yes,
memorize
absolutely.
is reactive.
Correct. Yes. I mean, yeah, the people that have that curious bug, so to speak, you're right. They're the ones that'll venture out into that dark forest and see what's out there. Well, the rest of us will be like, no, we're told not to go there. And it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes even making mistakes and learning from those mistakes is a very solid lesson that a lot of us just won't venture to do.
And your point about listening, listening is proactive because the natural reactive is to talk. You feel the urge to say something, explain why your product is better, why it's more expensive, why it's worth it. Instead of just proactively designing some questions to get the other person talking.
Well, salespeople hate silence, don't they?
You have to proactively hold your tongue.
Yeah. I mean, salespeople, I think, hate silence from themselves as much as they do from their customer.
Well, every new person, well, how can I become great fast? I go, come up with 3 great curiosity questions and then learn how to say nothing.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
There's a point where there's a little bit of tension, enough that the other person talks.
Yes, and makes them think, and not just regurgitate yes no questions to you, or yes no answers to you, I should say.
And what will end up happening is when you leave, that person will say, they were so informative.
Yes. And
It's
professional, don't forget that.
Yeah, and it's like they were reading my mind.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And again, trying not to be mechanical either. Talk to people, like you talk to a neighbor or talk to, somebody you see at the store. You need that comfort, that level of comfort that you're not grilling a customer. You're talking to them, speaking to them, listening to them, hearing them, processing that, and speaking back in an intelligent way.
Because I've never found people not interested in sharing what they care about.
Can you expand on that? What do you mean by that?
Well, when you're talking about the other person, not
Yeah.
about you and your product and the industry, when you're asking about, what are you up against?
Right. Yeah, you're trying to delve into their world.
Right. Because probably 1 out of 10 of those people pay somebody $200 an hour as a therapist because no one will listen to them.
I think we should lump ourselves in with therapists, bartenders, hairdressers, that whole lot. I think that's part of our job as well, because it happens all too often.
Because one of the top professions that I found is hospitality, and specifically bartender.
Yeah.
Because you got to be curious about what do they like, memorize it.
Right.
You don't say, hey, how was your day? You say, you want to watch the game or the news?
Right. Yep. There's some great listening skills in a bartender. And on top of that, their memories are sharp. That fellow walks in, that bartender has seen him before and knows that he wants a scotch on the rocks. That's what he's going to get. And as salespeople, same idea. We need to get to know our customer, what makes them tick, what their hot buttons, I guess you could say, are that makes them happy and pleasurable. And we need to remember those and keep, like you say, keep your ears open and your mouth shut sometimes.
And I've done a lot of research on bartenders. The popular ones aren't the talkers.
Right.
They're the listeners.
Right.
They're ask a question, dig into it, find out what you're doing this weekend. It's not the person who goes on and on and on and on. Those people aren't that popular.
No. And again, too, they let you do most of the talking and they do most of the listening and basically react on what you're saying to them and what you're telling them that you want to talk about.
Oh. And how did you develop these skills? Was it trial and error? It sounds like you might have had a process or a mentor or somebody, because you probably didn't come out of high school like this, right?
No, I joke, and I'll joke and I'll be serious. I joke and say I come from a very dysfunctional family, so it was my survival skills. And
PTSD.
yes. And seriously, though, when I was young, I did have a very good mentor, and he was a fellow that had a lot of corporate experience, was a great team builder, taught me a lot of team building skills, taught me a lot of people skills, and really took me under his wing. I worked with him for a good 10 years.
Wow.
And he groomed me, actually. That was my first sales management job. He was a general manager of a distribution company and groomed me for that position. And he was fair but firm. He was very likable. He taught me a lot of really key skills, not just with customers, but with coworkers and with vendors. And he taught me that your customers are not your most important people around you. That your vendors are key and they can make or break you, and your coworkers, obviously, the guy who's delivering the product that you need it to be there on time on a Friday afternoon. And he taught me how to take care of and communicate with and build relationships with all of those types of people, not just the customers.
And how did you know that what he was telling you was accurate versus what just worked for him?
I guess the results that he had shown in the past, he handled, again, he was a hands-on manager. He was not a armchair manager, I call it. And he handled some really major accounts, and just watching him move through these big accounts and manage these big accounts was, as a young person, almost awe-inspiring.
And you emulated that, or you wanted to have that capability?
Well, he was great in the sense too that he would let me debate why he's doing what he's doing. And yes, he let me challenge him. He let me challenge him, and I
That is
did.
gold.
And yeah, and I was like, "Why are you doing this when you could be doing that?" And he said, "Okay, if we do this, this, and this are going to happen. If we do that, this, and this are going to happen." And he even let me experience it in smaller scales, obviously, that wouldn't let me, damage any business to the company. So he was a hands-on leader that again, led by letting people try things hands-on, not just telling you this is what you need to do because I know it. And that was, just I think invaluable experience.
Well, that is proactivity, the idea of saying, if we do this, what do you think will happen?
Right. Right.
Because
Exactly.
people are like, well, let's just call the CEO or do this or cut the price or something else. Okay. If we did that, hypothetically, what do you think would happen?
Right.
And why?
Right. Right.
Because
Think about
he's probably seen the movie 10, 15 years longer than you've seen it, right?
it. Yes, exactly. He's played chess one too many times, and he knows the moves.
Yeah, I have a chess coach, and that's the question he asks is like, well, what do you think I'm going to do now? And why?
Right. Right. They always need to look 3, 4, 5 steps ahead, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
well, let's see what happens is not a good strategy.
No, it's not.
That's the opposite of a strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you kind of say, well, we got, let's say 3 options, what do you think is going to end up getting us closer to the deal?
Right. And what is going to be the best deal for both the customer and the company, and where's that win-win situation that we need?
Now, a bad manager would have just either hammered you, say, oh, that's not going to work. But then you're
Right.
like, well, why not? That's what you're thinking, but you don't debate it.
Right. Right. You respect the position, but at the same token, like you said, a good manager is going to give some freedoms and some latitudes to their people and let them experience both good and bad experiences for themselves.
Because nobody's either right or wrong, because you'd have to play the game out to see.
Right. Right. Good point.
But the unemotional debating, the discussion, the sharing experiences is critical.
Oh, it is. Absolutely, it is.
And when you talk to people who have that skill, that foresight, they usually got it early at the dinner table with their parents and stuff, where there was debating on current social, political, sports topics. It gets
Yeah,
people to
that's true.
think like other people.
That's true. Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's sort of a well balanced, type of family atmosphere that you're right that would challenge you in a healthy way.
Yeah. And are you able to do that with your reps today?
Yeah, I actually have a great following. I'm a regional sales director, so I direct basically half of the state, and there's another fellow that does the other half of the state. And my reps do not want to transfer out of my half of the state. They like our team, and I make sure that we keep a team atmosphere. We do more than just strategizing sales and doing things. We have little Friday afternoon barbecues sometimes at work that we bring the whole branch into. We do a lot of personal support with each other. Somebody's car breaks down. Hey, I'll pick you up at the mechanics tomorrow morning and drive you into the office. We really act as a team, a cohesive team, not just in sales, but even outside of sales.
Yeah. Because I always tell people the best experts about selling what you're selling is that all those people in that room. If you could just take the best attributes of all of them.
Well, yeah, and like I mentioned before, this mentor of mine, taught me that your customer is not the number one on your list of people that you're dealing with. Your team members are your family, and they're the people you're dealing with, and they're the people you take care of, and those are the people that are also take care of you.
Yeah.
And without that team, I guess, approach or that team spirit or team atmosphere, it can be a very lonely world that we live in, as you know, as a sales rep.
Right. Because the competition isn't the competition out in the marketplace. It's the competition next to you in the office. And that's the wrong game to play.
Correct. I mean, yeah, I've seen those offices, as I'm sure you have, that the reps are in competition with each other, and they won't help out each other. They won't tell them, hey, this worked for me or that worked for me. They're like, no, I'm keeping this to myself. This is
Gold.
my thing. And yeah, that's a very unhealthy atmosphere.
Cool. Hey, Scott, I appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
My LinkedIn profile, Scott Bland at linkedin.com. KSS Enterprises, S Bland at kssenterprises.com.